Hi, Courtney.
Hello.
It's so good to be with you today.
You too. This is fun.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving a little bit of your background, would be awesome.
Let's do it. I am a master's level therapist in Oklahoma. I've gotten both of my degrees from Oklahoma State University. I was in the MFT program there, and so I have come at it from a marriage and family therapist lens since grad school. Let's see. I thinking about all the things I want to say. I am also I am also an AMFT approved supervisor for licensure candidates, and I had a LADC, a licensed alcohol and drug counselor license
Mhm.
for a while. I've learned that since doing EFT and becoming more of a couples therapist, it's been harder to keep up with all of the information that I need for both licenses. So I've actually
Yeah,
let that one go.
gotcha. Okay. That
Yeah,
makes
so
sense.
I got out of grad school in 11 and I've been working in the field since then. Have been licensed since 2014 and have been working on my EFT certification for 3 years. I don't think it usually takes that long. I've just been very focused on some of my supervision and trying to get the right
Yeah.
skills on video in order to submit. So
Oh, cool. That's awesome. So
yeah,
do you
yeah.
currently work in like private practice?
Yeah, good call.
Okay.
Yes, I am in private practice in Edmond, Oklahoma, and have been doing that solely for a couple of years now. I was
Wow.
working in agencies and I did some practicum. I worked with some practicum students at OSU for a while. I've worked inpatient, I've worked outpatient. I have done
Wow.
pretty much the gamut of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
awesome. Okay, cool. So we are going to talk specifically about kind of we talked about how the students already have kind of a kind of basic understanding for EFT as a model in terms of kind of the steps and some of the kind of theoretical like underpinnings of the model. And so
Okay.
hopefully this conversation is just like to bring to life what that model actually looks like with someone who's actually practicing it in the real world
Yeah.
rather than just watching role play videos and kind of reading text about it. And so I was hoping that we could start off by just sharing kind of what initially attracted you to EFT. Like, is this a model that you were drawn to like when you were in school, or did it? Okay, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. So in grad school, we had to pick two models and make it into our theory of therapy. And so EFT was one of them, and then satir experiential was my other
Oh,
model.
okay. Yeah.
Yes, and then I've always been very drawn to contextual as well. But specifically the experiential models like EFT and Satir Whitaker, all the things were just the most intriguing to me because you could feel them in the room,
Yeah.
right? And they created like an emotional experience and then like you could feel change happening for me. And I've always been just kind of an emotionally focused person in general. So it just was evocative and enjoyable and I could touch it versus just thinking about it like CBT
Yeah.
narrative, things like that.
Oh, that's
Yes.
awesome.
It has, yes, I have loved it since grad school for sure.
It's funny because we keep talking about these different models and saying like when you read about one or learn about one and it feels like home, like it feels like this
Hmm.
makes sense with who I am. Like I don't have to force
Hmm.
myself into this approach. It just like fits naturally with like how I view the world. And that's what I hear you
Yeah.
saying. Like I was always an
Yeah.
emotional person. And so finding this model was like gave you language and words to be able to use in therapy that like fit most with who you are.
Yes, absolutely. I've in
Okay.
like if you go back to school, like there's postmodern and modern, right? And so like I always did come at it from a place of there's a set of rules that
Mhm.
generally big picture framework would be an umbrella.
Yeah.
And so this fits into that
Hmm.
very perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
so this would be considered like a modern model because there's like general assumptions that we're making about everybody. Gotcha.
Yes,
Yeah, that's right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What I guess because we were going to talk about this a little bit later on, but this is perfect.
Mhm.
From that kind of lens, is there like do you take the role as like the expert when you're doing? Okay.
Sure. So it kind of, but I would say that they're coming to you specifically, mostly you see couples, right? This
Yeah.
has been made into an individual therapy model recently. And you can see some families as well, but most of the time you're seeing this in a partnership process.
Yeah.
And when they're coming into your room, they are looking for expertise. They are looking for help because um, they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is, but I would also say that the therapist is looking to create an experience knowing that the couple knows what they need.
Yeah.
So it kind of is an expert role because we have certain things that we know are important. We know that people need to feel seen, heard, and held in a relationship. We know that relationships and dependency are vital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that we are the experts, but we are also connecting and meeting them right
Yeah.
where they're at.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah. So sort of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of a perfect blend of like
Yeah.
you have like expertise in certain things, right? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But then also you like allow space for like the individuality of each kind of person and
Yeah.
couple. There's okay.
Yeah. It probably is part of my personality too. I've just always been that person of like, if they were the experts in their own lives, they wouldn't need me, right? And
Mhm.
so like it probably is just a little bit of my own like ego, pride, all the things, but that is where I come from for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. And I think a lot of people relate to that and feel the same
Hmm.
way. So it makes sense that you would want to find a model that fits with that, right? Like
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
And I love it because you know, I we talk about in contextual multi-directed partiality so much. It is so important in EFT, the EFT world, because we are never vilifying, we are never diagnosing, we are not looking to create a bad guy in the situation. It's
Yeah.
more like always creating a space for the couple to work together and to know each other on a deeper level in order to fight against the cycle that
Right.
has created so much damage in their life.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I love
Hmm.
that. And as you were saying those words, it kind of made me think, just processing this out loud, that we've kind of vilified the word expert. And I like
Hmm.
the way that you're describing
Hmm.
it because it's like, and sometimes we think about like because especially if you're coming from a postmodern lens, it feels like expert is like it doesn't it's like a dirty word.
Yeah,
But it doesn't have to be, right? That's not, and so I love that you're kind of
yeah.
explaining it in that way.
That's a great
Um,
way to say that. Hmm.
yeah. So what we talked about kind of what attracted you to EFT, and it sounds like it was just like a good fit, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
What are some of the benefits that you would say you've kind of witnessed in using EFT?
Yeah, it's I would say overall the benefits of EFT, I talk about with my supervisees a lot of it feels like when we create first order, second order, third order change, right? You
Hmm.
can't help but move from first order into second order and hopefully third order change, right? But it is impossible to stay at first order change with EFT. And so for me, that is such a benefit, not only for the couples, because like I in my big T truths in my modern type of thinking, I would believe that they would need more than behavioral changes, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so it creates just such a sense of satisfaction and joy for me. So the benefit is that I get to see and feel some of the change,
Yeah.
but then also they get to experience the change, the joy, the connection of a
Yeah.
second order, third order process. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really fun
I love
when
that.
it goes well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ooh, do we have stories about when it doesn't go well?
Oh gosh, unfortunately, right?
I love
Yeah,
that.
so
Yeah, go
mhm,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, so yeah, that's one of the benefits, and I can talk about
Yeah.
more for sure.
I
Mhm.
like that you're saying that you're including like that you enjoy, like that you like the therapist. I
Yeah.
mean, if we're not enjoying therapy, we're not going to be doing this for very long and we're not going to be good at
Mm-hmm.
it, right? And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I like that as you're talking about it, you're like, these are the benefits for the clients, but it's also really reinforcing for me as a therapist to witness this change, like
Yeah,
in these
that's
ways.
mhm.
Because, yeah.
That's a great way to say that. Yeah, because you burn out, right? And we spend so much time trying to become good at this and trying to help that if we feel flat or if we feel like it is not connecting with us, it does. It starts to like move us into a place of apathy with
Mm-hmm.
our clients for sure. So I have to feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, I
Mhm.
know that you said naturally, like emotion focused language probably comes naturally to you, but for
Mhm.
therapists who worry about that becoming like too heavy or
Mhm.
who kind of lean towards like a cognitive approach maybe and it feels
Mhm.
really overwhelming to think about
Mhm.
using like
Mhm.
emotion focused therapy, what are some of the things that you've done to like protect from burnout? Like, are there specific
Yeah.
things that we're kind of going off script here a little bit, but I'm
No,
curious since
that's
you
great.
brought that up.
That's a great thing to think about. I would challenge like it's interesting. I would say people who go cognitive, um, that is such a vital part of connecting with people. And so like they're using the skill that they've learned.
Mhm.
EFT comes from such an attachment based
Mhm.
place, right? That like it would just also be important to say like, so are you connecting with your clients and yourself from that cognitive place, or is that a way to stay protected and to stay yeah, to stay protected, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And to have kind of a wall up, which a lot of clinicians understandably enjoy.
yeah.
There's something about that like just always thinking of, is that for your benefit, is that for your client's benefit,
Right.
what's the purpose of it, is it helpful, all the things. So then
Yeah.
to go into burnout, yeah, EFT has done this work in me of, you can't help, if you're going to do it well, you have
Mhm.
to give your whole self in the room.
Yeah.
And so you get very exhausted after your sessions. And so that is
Yeah.
where like self-care, going to your own therapist, having
Mhm.
consultations, um, I mean, being honest in the room, being honest in the therapy room,
Mhm.
having vulnerable moments where you aren't just feeling like you have to be the provider and the savior in the room.
Yeah.
Um, all of that has to happen
Love
because
that.
EFT is so fully engaging.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
love that. Oh, I love that. And
Hmm.
I love that you're
Hmm.
talking about like your own therapy, and
Hmm.
also this like the consultation piece, right? That like we preach that like peer consultation that never stops. Like I don't care how long you've been
Ever.
practicing therapy, if you're a good therapist, you're consulting,
Oh,
with peers.
absolutely.
So
Yes. Yes.
that's
That's
awesome.
funny. I've had my supervision consultation for EFT today, and then I've had my therapy right before this session. So I'm all ready.
So you're feeling self-cared today, cared for
So
today.
self-cared. Yes.
Okay, so are there other benefits that you'd like to highlight that we haven't gotten to yet?
Let's see. The other benefits of EFT, it's a very well-rounded model in that, because it takes such a big lens of attachment focused, it
Yeah.
covers a high range of presenting problems for
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
like whether it's teenagers or couples or families or individuals, I can always use the same lens and connect and create experiences because of how they've created the model
That's
and what the
awesome.
and what the goal is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I really like
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So have you worked with I know that there's still research on like the individual focus and family
Hmm.
focused.
Hmm.
Have you worked with individuals using EFT? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
It's been I especially since I've been in training for the last couple of years, it's been um it's hard not to do it.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hmm. It's hard not to just naturally move into like the space of, what are the patterns and how have you been wounded, and where are where are your raw spots, and like what are you longing for from the people that matter? And let's imagine them in the room, and let's create some healing. And what does your heart need? And what does your little person need? Right? Like, it's so hard not to just go to that space, because I know how helpful it really can be.
Yeah. It makes
Hmm.
sense. Well, especially when it's how you view the world. It's like you can't turn that off. It's like systems. Like once you learn and see the world through
Exactly.
that lens, you can't unsee it. And
Mm-mm.
so every
Mhm.
every person that comes through your door, you're probably viewing in that way. So it would be really hard to not to just switch
Yes.
and be like, I'm gonna do something totally different with you when this is like how you
Yes.
view everything. So
Yes. And that probably is in some ways where, like, I do pull, when you asked about the expert role, that probably
yes.
is where, in my room at least, they can say I want CBT, and I will work with distorted cognitions and
Hmm.
the thoughts all day long, but underneath, I'm
Right.
still considering their attachment longings,
Yeah. Okay.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So have
Hmm.
you, for patients like that, because I'm curious
Hmm.
about that. If they come in
Hmm.
saying, my doctor told me I need CBT, I Googled it and CBT is
Uh-huh.
what came up. Will you kind of start there and then go deeper into more of that emotion focused language if it feels like they're comfortable with that? Or do you have to work really hard to stay just cognitive, or do you kind of refer out? Like, how do you negotiate that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually when people are coming in because their doctors told them CBT is an effective approach for whatever they're needing, um, they're so open to considering all the options, right? And
Yeah.
so I just have an honest conversation about what CBT is, the kind of therapy I do, how they can absolutely go together, and what the ultimate goal is in reaching their goal for coming into therapy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because most of the time people are just doing what they're asked to do.
Yeah.
And CBT is an effective um, it is an effective model that has been well researched,
Hmm.
but it's not the only model. It's been well
Absolutely.
researched.
It has
Yeah.
been, and
Yeah.
we know why. It's much easier to
Yeah.
research than it is something
That's
like
right.
EFT, right? And
That's
so,
right. Absolutely.
or any other family therapy model.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I love that. I love that there's this openness that clients typically have, especially if you're transparent with them and honest with them and kind of sharing other perspectives. They're like, oh yeah, my doctor doesn't know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
um, so what do you think are any other benefits before we
I'm going to say those are the big ones. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Any limitations that you've
Let's see.
found or had to navigate?
Yeah, I would. You always, so in EFT therapy, you always do a good assessment at the beginning. And one of the biggest things you assess for are the four areas, including abuse,
Mhm.
so physical, emotional, verbal, sexual abuse, um, affairs, addictions, and then really motivation for continuing the relationship.
Mm,
So what you're always looking for any big area where there's going to be a massive wound in safety.
yeah.
And historically, you can work with a lot of that because you can work with the partnership on finding forgiveness and like connecting and
Mhm.
healing. But if any of those are really going to like not be fixed enough to get in the way, they're going to only create wounds in the
Yeah.
relationship. And so therefore you cannot make it safe enough to create an experiential
Yeah.
safe process. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that is where, when we run into those and we run into them, it's okay to run into them, but if we run into them and they will not change them,
Mm.
then we have to try something else.
Okay. So if
Yeah.
the abuse, for example, is ongoing, or if there's like
Right.
ongoing violence or something like that, and there's no, okay, gotcha.
Right. And it's like, and even though they say they will stop, right? But like they continue the process and they cannot stop. And then they will not get individual therapy to work on some of those goals.
Okay.
That therefore it would not be safe,
Okay. So those are,
because,
okay.
yeah. Hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
boundary that
Because,
you talk about in the beginning of
yes.
therapy, and then so that
Yes.
expectation is set. Okay.
Mhm. Yes. And so they know that if I continue to find that this gets in the way of creating a vulnerable and safe connection, we won't be able to do couples therapy in this way.
Yeah.
You will need to build the strength and the foundation in these other ways, whether it's addiction work or domestic
Gotcha.
violence or all the things to then create safety.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times though, I will say as an EFT therapist, I have learned that that line of where it's too far gone
Yeah.
is much further
Okay.
than we would expect it to be.
Yeah. I was curious about that, like how, especially
Mhm.
as a new therapist,
Mhm.
how do you know where that line even
Mhm.
is? I'm sure it
Yeah, and
just
that's
takes time to learn.
it does. It takes time, and that's where I would say your supervisor and probably working with more of an EFT. If this is your model, working more with an EFT therapist
Yeah.
who supervises would be good, only because it, when you compare this model to other models, it can feel like you are moving into grayer territory at times,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just part of the experience.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's really good advice. Okay. So would you say if there was an affair in the past, but the affair is stopped, that wouldn't be a
Right.
hindrance to therapy, but it's that that affair is
Right.
ongoing. Okay. Okay.
And they're not willing to end it. Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That distinction is
Absolutely.
helpful. And it makes me feel
Mhm.
like those conversations, you have to feel very confident in the model because it feels like those conversations are very direct.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
for folks who are gaining comfortability in the therapy room, like that, those could
Mhm.
be pretty intimidating conversations, I would imagine. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you talk about them so calmly and directly, and because of your years of experience. Do you remember those being difficult conversations to have years ago? Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I still get chills thinking about like those first times you had to confront some of this. It it's you feel like you're doing something wrong and you feel like you're breaking that join and breaking the
Yeah.
foundational pieces of therapy, and yet like they're already damaging their
Hmm.
relationship.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very validating, I think, that it
But
takes.
yes, I fully remember that. Yeah.
How long would you say did it take before you started to feel like I've got this down? Like
Uh,
I'm feeling more confident in the therapy room. How long would you say that took?
just in the therapy room or the EFT room?
Ooh, maybe both.
Okay, so in the therapy room, it's funny. I would say I've only felt stronger in the therapy room probably because of my EFT
Yeah.
extra work,
Yeah.
because I have so much more understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing and the goal, and then some of the techniques that get me to that place.
Yes.
That I think I've just now, like, really, in some ways, the last few years, started to feel strong and
Yeah.
confident about who I am as the therapist.
I love that for so many reasons. One,
Mhm.
because as students, it's very overwhelming because you're trying to learn yourself as a therapist. You're trying to learn all
Mhm.
these models. You're in school. You're trying to help your clients the best you can. There's a lot of insecurities that come up, right? And so trying to instill that it just takes time, that like no one is going to graduate. You don't get your diploma and then you're like, I'm a competent therapist. That is not a realistic expectation.
No,
And so
no.
hearing from people like you say it takes years to be able to build
Mhm.
that confidence in that clinical practice to
Mhm.
feel like I've got this. Like that, I feel like that's very normalizing. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, and I would even validate, like, I if you don't, maybe your personality pushes more into a confident place, but I would say most therapists, when they're hit with something new or different than they've ever been hit with, they will always feel that. So
Mm-hmm.
when I have new clients that are hitting me with just a heavier amount of conflict and confrontation, it will hit that place. But
Yeah.
I think my time and experience moves through faster with some of that anxiety.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So there's always going to be times. There's always going to be complaints you've never been confronted with before, or a couple, because everyone obviously is different, so it's always going to show up a little bit differently. And there might be moments of hesitation where it's like, okay, that maybe that confidence feels rattled, but that you go through that process so much differently and faster. And I don't know if confidence is the right word, but you feel rattled for whatever reason, or hesitant, or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
that feels like, or
Unsure. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you move through
Yeah.
that much faster than when you're new and get stuck there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You don't know what you don't know early on. That is just the problem. There's
Yeah.
just so much you don't know yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also
Mhm.
love what you're saying about, I think we get lots of eye rolls when we ask people kind of, what model are you using with this client or patient? How can
Mhm.
I best support you? And you have to know that, because otherwise, and kind of like what you were saying, the more comfortable you got with EFT, the more confident you felt in the therapy room, because you feel grounded. You know kind of what the goal is, then that guides your assessment, that guides your technique, that guides so much of what
Mhm.
you're doing if you're
Mhm.
rooted in something. And so
Yeah.
there are lots of things that work, but you have to know what you're doing in the room, like what the intention is. And so
Yes.
I feel like
Yes.
that's so important when people are feeling stuck in therapy or feeling like they don't know what they're doing. Like, I'm always going back to what model are you trying to use here? Because if
Mhm.
you're not
Mhm.
using one, then you're gonna feel like that.
Absolutely. It's funny as you say that. This is a little off topic, but it reminds me too of I just went to a training for indigenous populations,
Yeah.
and um, they were talking a little bit about one of the struggles with CBT in indigenous populations is that there's a black and white, right and wrong in some of the cognitions, and so like that's just not a helpful cognition to have. And yet, in some ways, if you have that mindset, you're invalidating some of the belief systems and the processes that they were raised with,
Yeah.
right? Which makes complete sense. And but if you're only coming at it from a place of that kind of a model,
Mm-hmm.
it can you can do damage without meaning to, right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I only say that to be like one of the things I like about EFT too is that I uh, I work so far down on the like the groundwork of where I start is that people need relationship and that they long to feel connected to, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
my only grounding principle.
Yeah.
And so that's also why I like it because I feel like I don't get boxed in anywhere,
Yeah.
you know?
I love that. And
Yeah.
that guiding principle, that is crucial into your identity and development as a therapist. Like, if
Mhm.
you can hone
Mhm.
in on, this is what I believe
Right.
about either where problems start, or how people get stuck, or what people need to feel fulfilled. Like, if you can narrow that down into something like what you just said, that
Mhm.
helps guide so much, right? So
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
impactful. I'm sure there's some like peace that comes with that, you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
Cool. Well, okay, so we were talking about limitations and kind of
Mhm.
mentioning those kind of four areas
Right.
where we have to be aware of and kind of direct and set those expectations if we're going to do this kind
Yeah.
of work. Are there
Yeah.
other limitations that you've found in your work?
You know, I would say that besides those limitations where you have to set a boundary, I do have clients who come in and I lay it all out there for them and I communicate where I'm coming from and explain the model and we have some of the conversations and they start to feel that and it hits this place of unsafety for them, right? It's not safe. And so I do have some clients who are like I don't want to agree with that. I don't want to buy into the idea that like
Mm,
I can't do life alone. Um, and so I don't I don't want to do that. Right. So I do have those clients
yeah.
who who feel that way. And so with them, I have to change I have to change some of my approaches. Not that once again I'm changing the foundation of how I do what I do, but I do have to try to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
So
challenging.
it is challenging. Yeah, absolutely. It because it's from my perspective because that is my modern thought. I can just see that they're scared or they're
Right.
struggling,
It
or
still
deep
feels
down.
protective. Right.
Yeah, right.
You're
Deep
like,
down
I
there's
don't buy
something.
it. I'm not
Yeah.
buying it.
Right. But like, to say that completely, then
Right.
they shut it, they put up their defenses, and it's a
Yeah,
whole process of losing connection. So
absolutely.
that would also be sometimes where I have a weakness, when I get someone who will not let themselves lean into something that feels unsafe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Hmm.
It sounds like this is a very patient model.
That's a great
Okay.
way to say that. Yeah.
Okay. So there's some
Yeah.
there's some level of patience that's needed on the therapist part if you're gonna do this work well.
Yes, it is. Yes, that is a great word for it. You are always looking at them with this love and care and patience and kindness,
Hmm.
knowing that they're doing the best they can, even in their fighting and
Right.
hurting their partner and all the wrong things. It is because they are desperate for connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Great way to say that.
I love that. What okay, so let's if you're wanting to, could we jump into maybe some case examples if you have
Sure.
any that come to
Yeah.
mind that would be helpful to kind of share or talk through?
Yeah. I was trying to think, would it be helpful to be like just a general, like, kind of a relationship, so like a male female or things like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Whatever
get that.
level of detail you want to provide is perfect.
Okay. All right, good. Let's see. I get a lot of so the majority of my population is heterosexual, same, or yes, heterosexual, and um but I do have some same sex. And those are always very interesting, because the heterosexual relationships, part of what I do in every session is we join, then we create an attachment history, and we understand from an assessment place where they learned how to connect,
Yeah.
and then we are building their cycle of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see that through, like, on through EFT, you see it through that infinity sign. And then I've learned it as there's this bow tie process that I use specifically. And so you create that in order to then make that the enemy, realistically,
Yeah.
in the process. Yeah. So then it's interesting, because with heterosexual couples, especially in Oklahoma, um, there's just so many traditional roles and so many
Mhm.
processes of male and female boxes.
Yeah.
And so it is so helpful to do the cycle for clients, because they can put words to that thing that they just had to fall into their whole life, right?
Yeah.
So let's see.
Wow.
I say that to say, like, so some of the most interesting ones are when we have moved away from that normal pattern. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really interesting. Um, I would say probably the one I'll talk about is, I have a male and female who have been married for 25 years, and they came in after a uh, she believed he had been flirting with a woman at a bar, and just felt completely cheated on, and just so hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So they come in, and their cycle is, she gets very loud and angry and volatile in their cycle, and he maintains distance and withdraws in order to protect, right?
Yeah.
Making her the bad guy in all processes in their
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah. So that's part of the cycle. And so what we've been working on, um, in some ways, they've been a good example of when you need to take a step back and EFT isn't helpful, because
Mhm.
they came in with all of that, and they've had suicidal thoughts and ideology. They've gotten violent. They have
Yeah.
threatened each other. Like, there's been all of these moments where I've had
Yes.
to almost pause
Yeah.
EFT and say, okay, you guys are unsafe. This is dangerous. What are you going to do about it? And like create kind of like a crystallizing moment of, if this continues,
Right.
for one, you're not going to be married anymore, but I can't see you. And what are we like? What do you
Right.
need? All these things.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
then as they calm down and they start to deal with their stuff, right? Like we can move back into EFT.
Wow.
And so it's been so good because I think I've seen them for maybe about 30, 35 sessions at this point. And we see each other on a weekly basis. And they're now getting to the point where um, she, even when she's getting upset and overwhelmed, she's acknowledging and honoring that that's because she's felt helpless and
Mm-hmm.
unloved and uncared for her whole life, and that she is longing to be loved for who she is, just as
Mm-hmm.
she is,
Yeah.
right? And he's able to say, I feel worthless as a husband because every time things have gone wrong in our relationship, and you have uh, threatened to leave me or threatened to hurt yourself or all these things, there is nothing I can do about it. And one of the only ways I feel I have any worth as a man is as your husband, is to take care of you. And so they're starting to be able to have some of these conversations, which
Mm-hmm.
is creating the new experience
Right.
to then give them more information to then break the cycle.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're still working on it, but it has been it's been something. These are conversations that they have not had in their 25 years of
Wow.
marriage. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Um, I think it's also always good. The assessment part at the beginning is so important because that's where you learn about their families of origin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you learn about how they received comfort or did not receive comfort. Those are very specific sheets I have that they fill out.
Yeah.
And then you learn just about their protections when they feel like they are in danger
Right.
in
Wow.
that relationship. Yeah.
The assessments that you use, do those come from like EFT trainings, or are those available to therapists if they haven't undergone like certificate? Okay.
Yeah, you can find them. You can find
Okay.
them. I can give you the websites for them. Um they're not just for EFT
Gotcha.
certified therapists or
Okay.
anything. Yeah.
But that foundation I think is so important. And what I'm hearing you say, which
Mhm.
is also I think evidence of you being like an experienced clinician, is that you have kind of a set standard of what that first session is, this first couple of sessions are going to look like for everybody. And so
Mhm.
there's time joining, of course, but then you're getting into the family of origin and attachment histories, and that is
Yes.
standard across the board, rather than I think sometimes when we're
Yeah.
new, we kind of come in, we spend time joining, and then like sessions and sessions go by and we're like, what are we doing? What are we ground? I don't know where to go now. I don't know how to help them. And so
Yeah,
gathering all of
Megan.
that information up front is so important, especially for a model like EFT, where
Yeah,
you need
good
that
call.
insight.
That's a great call. Yeah, and if I can I'll just,
Oh yeah.
the first session is a joining session because you're spot on this. I do this for every couple. So
Mm-hmm.
first and second session can be joining sessions depending on how much time you need. The third and fourth session, I meet with them individually just to create a different type of join. I also help them know at that point I'm not keeping any secrets from
Gotcha.
the couple relationship. And then fifth and sixth session, I have them take the attachment histories. I have them bring them back and they talk about those with each other in the
Oh,
room to
okay.
kind of create a new understanding and see if there's any information that the partner didn't know, right,
Yeah.
about the family of origin and things like that.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right. I do that specific thing, and then we move into these other chapters that I know are going to come
Right.
from EFT, and we just do them because I know they're going to be helpful, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Hmm.
When you say joining for the first couple sessions, what does that usually look like for you? Is it different with each couple, or do you have like techniques that you
So
like to use?
it's it's not different. The questions can be a little different depending on what they bring, but it truly is just tell me all about yourself
Yeah.
And I want to know who you are, and a lot of laughter, or a lot of, like, as they're crying, a lot of empathy and reflective listening, and all of the understandable things. It is not, you are not challenging ever in those
Yep.
first sessions.
I love that.
That would do so much damage in those
Yeah.
first sessions. Yeah.
I love that because we
Absolutely.
talk so much about joining and building rapport, and you have to have this foundation, before jumping
Mhm.
into any theory. Like, you have to have a relationship with your client, right? And so,
Mhm.
I love that you're specifically saying for those first couple of sessions, I'm not challenging, I'm not maybe even
Mhm.
like providing education. It is simply
Mhm.
just empathy and compassion and facilitating
Mhm.
understanding and
Mhm.
reflective listening and all of these things that just let them know that we're there, right?
Yeah,
And like what
absolutely.
and kind of start to facilitate what that kind of the bond, right, between therapist
Yeah.
and client, that it's not
Yeah.
that's really, really helpful because I think a lot of times we just jump right in and we're
Mhm.
like, okay, first session, great, tell me why you're here. Okay, now, and
Mhm. Mhm.
we just bulldoze, right? Right
Mhm. Just go
through.
straight through. Mhm.
And they're obviously their joining continues every single session, right? That rapport
Mhm.
building that happens in every interaction. You continue to build on that, but there
Yeah.
has to be it feels like it's so important to have dedicated time just for that
Mhm.
too, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would say another technique that is so simple, but it's probably more of an experiential thing, is um a lot of times new therapists, or even therapists in different models, you ask a question, they follow up with a statement, and they tell you about something, and then you ask another question, right? So it's as simple as, you ask the question, they say the thing, yes, that makes so much sense. You
Yes.
just validate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
For
Yes.
some reason, that for same for me, before I got into this training a lot, we skip that step. But that is
Yes.
so important for
Yes.
people to feel heard. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it feels like an interview. It
Mhm.
feels like you've lost the human piece of therapy and just send
Yeah.
them to to their phone and they can do a mobile
Yeah.
app where they answer these questions,
Yeah.
right? Like, it feels like when we don't do that piece of like
Yeah.
acknowledging and the nonverbals and the leaning forward and the facial
Yeah.
expressions and all the things that are like, I am listening, I hear
Mhm.
you, I'm right here with you. Like, when we're just asking questions, getting the answer and moving on, it doesn't I totally agree. There's a
Mhm.
piece of the magic of therapy that's missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to consider, and this is why I don't know if your training program does this, but like watching video of yourself is so
Mhm.
important because that's the only way you're going to know if you're doing this or not, right? And so
Absolutely.
watching video to say like, why am I rushing this, or why am I jumping question to question like I'm interrogating this poor person, like
Yeah.
watching yourself
Yep.
is the only way, or having someone watch you is the only way you're going to pick up on those subtle things that make such a big difference.
It is invaluable. I
Yeah.
completely agree. And so I had to do that for certification,
Yeah.
but I will continue to do that after that, because I learned so much just watching the video back, not because of just the
Mhm.
client, but yes, why? What did I miss, and why did I miss that? Right?
Yeah.
And why did
Yeah.
I focus so much on that? Or where was I feeling anxious and stressed out and
Yes.
avoidant in the room? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I
Mhm.
love
Totally.
that. That's impressive.
Mhm.
Okay. So I had a question come up, and then if there's other case stuff, we can talk about that too. But I was having this thought as you were talking about that couple. What is the role in EFT? Traditionally came before I did medical family therapy from like a Bowen perspective, and so this
Mhm.
idea of differentiation that's really important. And
Mhm.
as you're talking about EFT, I'm thinking about what is the balance of like being able to provide for like one's own emotional needs rather than
Mhm.
being dependent or reliant on a partner. And so
Sure.
how does that is that part of the conversation with EFT? Or is that making sense, kind of what I'm
Yeah, no, it
asking?
makes complete sense.
Okay.
I would say that EFT and attachment-based therapy, I would say it moves more into, we need connection.
Hmm.
We need it. And so many people don't have it or don't feel safe in it.
Yeah.
And so therefore cannot fully show up and connect, right?
Okay.
And so therefore, a lot of times we learn to meet our own needs and we learn to be strong and take care of ourselves and differentiate
Mm-hmm.
realistically because it is not safe. And we have
Mm-hmm.
learned that we will only get wounded and
Right.
that therefore we cannot, right?
Yeah.
So I would say it probably comes at it from that angle
Yeah.
more
That's so,
than
yeah.
more than the balance of it.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Like, and this is what I think is so interesting about our field is that there are
Mm-hmm.
so many different avenues to take
Mm-hmm.
one client, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
from a from that perspective, it would be differentiate and then you can be in a healthy relationship. Whereas from an
Right.
attachment lens, it's being in a healthy, secure relationship is going to allow you to differentiate, right? And so
Yes.
it's, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not in that language, but that's how it feels
Yeah.
to me. It's so flip-flopped of like what comes first.
Yeah.
And so it's so fascinating how many different ways we can kind of view families and kind of work on some
It
of
is
these
amazing,
supporting
right? I
people.
know. I know. I think it just it because I loved Bowen in grad school too. It's awesome. I think the thing it just always it's all the model is always trying not to vilify anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you are longing to be
Mm-hmm.
seen and heard, so you want connection. But because people could not because they had never learned, right? And they were not safe, they harmed you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not because they meant to, but because they did not have what they needed either. But then they harmed you, and you learned that I cannot trust
Mm-hmm.
the people that I need to trust the most, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just, it's calling. What I love about EFT is you call out the problem always. You're never ignoring it. You're never
Right.
saying, I'm not going to talk about the fact that you're hitting your wife, right? Because we are, because that you
Yeah.
are hitting your wife and you are creating damage and you are pushing her
Wow.
away and she will never trust you. But you are longing for connection. And the thing you are doing is making your wife never connect with you. That must be so painful to know that
Yeah.
you are doing damage like that
Wow.
when you long to connect,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like that kind of process of never vilifying. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Hmm.
love, but like you said, you're calling out the problem for what it is. We're not
Yes.
tippy
Yeah.
toeing around that. We're going to call it out,
Mm-mm.
but it's
Mm-mm.
non-pathologizing and it's
Mm-mm.
rooted in what need
Yeah.
what need needs to be fulfilled or is unfulfilled.
Yes. Yes. I will say too, like if I go back to some of the strengths, and it may just be my personality, I have I have become a stronger confrontational therapist
Yeah.
because of this model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see
Mm-hmm.
how that would need to be. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like that would be an important characteristic of the therapist. But I also love that you're saying that that can be developed. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that part is worrisome to someone, like don't run away from this model, that can be developed over
Mm-hmm.
time with practice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it feels so good when you're like, damn right, I did that. Yeah.
I love that. And we're like, if we could go back and watch a video of us 10 years ago, that would be mortifying, right? Like
I know. I'm glad we don't keep that. That's funny.
there's a statute of limitations on
On
was there
our
any
embarrassment.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Is there any other anything else from that case or any other cases that you wanted to highlight?
Let's see. I think just a good thing to know about, like, and you probably know this based on what they've learned from the bones of EFT, but like family where it's child parent can
Yeah.
be really interesting from an EFT lens. And you are you're doing it a touch differently in that
Yes.
you're taking more of that, like the parent is responsible for the child. The
Right.
child is never
Okay,
responsible for the
beautiful.
emotional connection of the parent, right?
Yeah, of
And so it's
course.
healing some of those wounds that normally happen in
Yeah.
parentification and all of the stuff.
Yeah.
Um, those are really cool too. But
Yeah.
you do have to like consider and change your lens a touch when you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah. You had
Hmm.
mentioned earlier that you do have some same-sex couples. Is there anything that you have to
Hmm.
modify about the language? I don't know the language well enough to know if it feels like inherently traditional or anything, but like is there anything that you have to
Yeah.
kind of modify for it to fit with like diverse families?
You know, I I would say no, because when you're doing the process, you work really hard to use their language just like every other model, right? So if they're a
Yeah.
partner, they're a partner. If they're your
Hmm.
love, they're your love. If they're your wife. So it's like
Yeah.
when you are connecting the dots of longing to feel seen or cared about by the person who matters most to you in the world,
Hmm.
that is universal.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right, absolutely. I think for me, the hardest part, I've had the most trouble with, like, I have dating couples who come
Hmm.
in, and I keep being like, so when your wife turns to you and like shows up that way, I'm like, damn it. I'm sorry, I'm cussing too.
No,
That's
it's okay.
okay.
It's okay.
Um, that's probably the most hard part, is like trying to remember the language and keeping it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that work with dating couples where you're not sure if they're,
Hmm.
it feels like with, and
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
definition of marriage can be different, of course, but like there feels like a level of commitment that might be different for someone who's married versus people who are dating. So
It
I know
is,
that's a
absolutely.
generalization, but generally speaking, and is that hard to do like this
Yeah.
type of model with people who are like been together 6 months and are like 20 years old and you're like, okay, come back in like 5 years.
Yeah, right, right. You know, it is interesting. I don't get many of those, right? Because like
Yeah.
if they're proactive enough to come into therapy, in 6 months, a lot of times they are the older couples who are on their second or third relationship, and
Yeah.
therefore they have a lot of baggage and stuff. So those brand new babies of like 19, 20, 21, right? To see them, that would actually be kind of fun, because what you do is you just move faster through the model,
Yeah.
because they don't have all the baggage
Yeah.
that you're having to like deal with
It's
and explore.
true.
So then,
It'd be
because
fun.
on at the end, yeah, at the end of EFT, you get these like you get these bonding moments where you're
Hmm.
creating like this new connection, and then you get to create new connection with these little babies who've never had it before. It's so that would be cool.
I love that. Would it act kind of more preventative in that way? Like if you were
Yeah,
earlier, okay, that makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
absolutely. Hmm.
Okay.
It would be like, it would be such a foundational.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be so good.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Awesome. Okay, I was curious. I know we've talked a little bit about that you're going through kind of the certificate. Is there
Yeah.
for students who are watching saying like, I want to learn more about EFT. I don't know what I'm doing, but it sounds interesting or like something I want to learn. What would you say like would
Yeah.
be a good next step?
Yeah. Okay. So for one, I'm gonna say, so like what we were just talking about new couples.
Yeah.
I would also say for new therapists who are in relationship, right? They have Hold Me Tight workshops that are, the book Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson
Yeah.
is one of the books. Um, they have Hold Me Tight workshops that are these foundational 2-day uh intense, what are
Yeah.
they called? Whatever they're called.
Like a
Workshops
workshop.
where,
Yeah.
yeah, but just intense ones where it's the whole day. Anyway,
Yeah. It's
intensives,
exhausting.
that's the word. Yeah. I would highly recommend that for
Oh.
therapists and their partners, because I have helped with many of those, and they are almost just as impacting, especially they're impacting for the
Oh.
relationship, but they're super impacting as a therapist too.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I can give some information on where to find those.
Yeah.
That would be one thing. And then if you're just looking for more information, the books, right? There's so many books, but this is probably the most recent one by Sue Johnson.
Yeah.
Super helpful. It runs through emotionally focused individual therapy as well as EFT, and
Okay.
it's a really good book.
Okay.
She has a lot of good things to say. Um, uh, ICEFT is the international group,
Okay.
ICEEFT.com. And so they have a lot of resources about finding supervisors, finding trainings, finding therapists in your area, things like
Okay.
that. They're very
Yeah.
helpful. And then try EFT is Sue Johnson's
Yeah.
site where you can find a lot of good information. And then I wanted to also tell you about the trainer that I've been working with specifically. I just have to give her a shout out because I think she is amazing. Her name's Debbie Semeka Diaz, and she is in New Jersey. And
Okay.
her website is, make sure I have that. It is couplestherapynj.com.
Oh, okay.
Coupletherapynj.com. And therefore, and I give that because she's a trainer that does like online externships. She does core skills, which is kind of the next process if you're looking towards just more training, more certification.
Yeah.
And so sorry, there we go. So she would just be a good resource that I
Yeah.
know personally if you wanted like a specific name of a trainer, even though there's a lot of really good trainers out there.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful. So it sounds like I think the intensive is such a good idea. And that
Mhm.
that would be something that could even be helpful while they're still getting like in school,
Mhm.
because it feels
Yes.
like it would be really hard to like do extra training when you're in school. Like just graduate. Like
Oh yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
graduate. So
Get through
yeah.
graduation. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. I would say at that point, I would say a hold me tight workshop. I would say the books. And
Yeah.
I would say there are some really good videos if you want to see some more EFT specifically before graduation.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
post
And you can,
graduation. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. And then post graduation, I was all into EFT before I graduated. I loved it. I
Yeah.
have only become a really good EFT therapist since I've done the extra work. So I will
Gotcha.
challenge
Okay.
that.
I was gonna say, like, is your kind of bias that if you want to do this work well, that you got to
Mhm.
seek the additional training and support?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially because if you're feeling, I have a lot of supervisees who start to feel a little burned out after school because of the hours and just the whole process. And
Yeah.
part of that is because they just do not feel like they have ever dived into something deep enough. And this helps with that process. So it might be
Yeah.
something to put on the back burner if this model interests you.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. They're getting
Mhm.
a taste of everything. And
Yeah.
so get through that. And then once you graduate and you're attracted to something, do some extra learning on that
Hmm.
specific model, and that will help
Hmm.
provide some more
Hmm.
direction.
Yeah, that's super validating for any model that
Yeah,
you're really passionate about.
I think so
Hmm.
too. Okay.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that we didn't get to say about EFT that you would like to share before we?
Oh man, I just feel like I vomited all over you guys. So,
I loved it.
no, I like if you have any questions, they can always reach out to me.
Okay.
But yeah, it's way to go being in grad school. I know it's a lot. I will say like, just do something that gives, like, do a model that gives you passion, just like I feel
Yes.
about EFT.
Yes. Thank you for
Hmm.
saying that. That's so important. Like we want to love what we're doing. Like,
Yes,
so yes,
yes,
embrace what feels right. Yeah.
that's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. I appreciate it so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Megan. It's been a pleasure.